Welcome to the Wholehearted Wellness Podcast. As a friendly reminder, the Wholehearted Wellness Podcast is not a substitute to receiving mental and physical support from a licensed wellness provider. We encourage you to speak with your wellness provider prior to trying any therapeutic modalities mentioned on this podcast. Welcome back to the Wholehearted Wellness Podcast. My name is Arielle Campbell, and I am so excited to be here with one of my good friends, Kim. She is just such a joy, y'all. And everybody just needs to meet Kim. She's such a blessing and just a bright light. She is a holistic nurse and brings such unique things to the table. So, Kim, tell us a little bit about you and about what brought you into this profession.
So for me, it was once I graduated from UL, go Cajuns. I actually almost said Tigers, not even a little shoe. Anyways, but so after I graduated and I started in the nursing profession, I was like, man, something's missing. Something was missing for me. Something is, in nursing, things are the theory is so much more intentional and like there's so much more to it, and so whenever I got into my career, I just felt like it was just kind of superficial. Like I wanted
Yeah.
something more. I wanted something more than med management and things like that. And so then I stumbled upon the specialties. And so that's whenever I started for my double board certification in holistic nursing and then nurse coaching. So that's kind of like the educational avenue, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
So it's been a decade in the making to get to this point of working with clients the way that I do. And the reason why is because I felt like I was leaving so much at the bedside.
Yeah.
Whenever I was working with patients and there were certain things that I was doing with them that other patients weren't showing the same progress, I guess you can say, or they weren't showing the same like pain relief. That's something easy that we can tangible. Like pain relief. It was very different with the patients that I was treating and I was at bedside with than others, because I was bringing a different aspect to it. Holism is in nursing should be in every environment.
Yeah.
That's my ultimate goal is to help nurses bring it in every environment because it's so healing for the patients. Because sometimes in the medical system, we think that it's, diagnosis specific. It's leading with the diagnosis, and I'm sure you can attest to that too.
It's a lot of let me fit you
Mhm.
into this diagnosis. Let me fit you into this treatment rather than let's tailor
Mhm.
this care to your specific needs, your unique needs. I
Exactly.
understand. I
It's like
understand.
it's like diagnosis led rather than allowing it to be a supportive tool.
Right.
Because yes, someone can fit all the criteria, all the questionnaires and things like that, but they're still an individual first.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever it comes to their story and how they came about the diagnosis, it's very different,
Right.
whether it's familial trauma, whether it's, familial patterns, for various diagnoses. So it's important that we look at the person for the person first.
Yep.
And that's one of the main goals in holism, especially as a nurse, is looking at the whole person, not just seeing the chart and saying, okay, this is the laundry list of the things that's going on. These are the medications. While all these things are important because it's showing you what the body's experiencing and then what medications are and how the medications are influencing the body that's experiencing this disease process. But still, there's a person behind there,
Right.
in front of their
Yeah, that's something I've definitely have wrestled with accepting insurance. A big reason why I accept insurance is to be able to provide affordable therapy. But there's so much limitation there.
Yeah.
You have to provide a diagnosis, and every time I do a diagnosis, I'm like, but this isn't even really it. This is
Yeah.
just a
It's scratching the
handful.
surface.
It's just a handful of symptoms, which is something so much bigger. And as a trauma therapist, I view everything through the lens of, this is just the body responding to trauma, whether it's anxiety, OCD, depression, even bipolar and ADD and ADHD. Now, I'm not saying that's the always the answer. It's
Yeah.
trauma, but for a lot of times it is. So I hear you.
And then it's like, this whole notion of trauma in itself. So often we think of trauma as like this one thing,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a big familial situation or
A
in
car
combat
accident.
boots
Yeah,
or
right.
in a car accident. But trauma to the body is very different. And that's why,
Mhm.
my specialty as a stress relief coach, this is why I'm like, stress is the root of everything. Even though
Mhm.
I like am a big proponent of like there's no magic pill, there's no one fix or anything. But whenever you look at stress, stress creates trauma to some
Mhm.
extent. Even when
Mhm.
you're working out, what are you doing? You're tearing muscles to then grow. But if the muscles don't know in that tear, in that stress that there's growth after that, then it's more of like this suffrage.
Right.
So then if we look at the stressors and the traumas in life and we don't just go back to, okay, trauma is A, B, and C. No, we have
Mhm.
to really look at what is traumatic for that person.
Right.
And nowadays with all the like, the lingo and the loosely using words, and it really dilutes, whenever we have these conversations, it really
Sure.
dilutes certain things because it's like, oh, well, this is this and this is that. And it's like the cool, trendy thing to do is like
Mhm.
categorize once again. And so if we really,
And I think like being able to categorize can sometimes be very healing for
oh,
people
yeah, it can be
because it
absolutely
it
be a tool.
provides it provides that I have language,
Yes.
you know. It's neat how you connect that trauma piece with stress and
Hmm.
just thinking about how, okay, think about our stress system with
Hmm.
our adrenals, our pituitary gland, the adrenaline, the cortisol. It's
Hmm.
such an important, beautiful gift that our body has to get us out of danger.
Hmm.
But what causes the stress is when we are in that state for too long,
Yeah.
which is exactly trauma,
Well,
and they go
and
interchangeably.
yes.
But like you said, two different people can
Hmm.
be in an event, and
Hmm.
one person it's going to be traumatic, and one person for their body, they may be able to overcome it and it does not cause
And
trauma.
that's where the individualized experience is so
Yes.
important
Yes.
because the stress is the factor, but whether or not the stress is equating to trauma is very different. Like you just said,
Mhm.
two people, like you can have, I remember reading about this study and it was identical twins and they were brought
Mhm.
up in, I don't know if you maybe read
Mhm.
the same thing.
Mhm.
They were brought up in like this chaotic, stress filled household. One just was like this go getter and do it. And so essentially that one was probably using the stressors sometimes maybe non-therapeutically because we tend to overcorrect sometimes as a protective mechanism.
Mhm.
But then the other one was, ended up in jail and like all these things and was like having a lot of suffrage. So it's the same story, but
Mhm. Different
the
experiences.
stress was experienced differently. So one was more traumatizing to that person than the other one. Now it's not to say that the one that was the go-getter
Overachiever.
didn't have the trauma and is not experiencing that trauma in his own way, but it's just to say that it looks so different and it's experienced so differently. And if we can
And handled so differently,
exactly.
where this person that had the one twin that had gone to
Mhm.
jail, may have had more of a collapse response,
Mhm.
where this overachiever had more of a fight flight response,
Yeah.
and they coped probably more with anxiety, OCD,
Mhm. Mhm.
perfectionism. So
And so
I know
once
when.
again, back to the stress system, it goes back
Mhm.
to that stress system of how, going in from acuity to chronicity, like where does it sit? Where does it lie? And then in the intermingle, because if it's something from childhood, you have these chronic stressors, but then you have this stressor that comes into play within your current life, maybe professionally or within a relationship or something.
Mhm.
So then you have this acute stressor on top and around of this chronic stressor.
Mhm.
So then if we can, by what you do, but what I do, and intermingling together, if we can help people to have a more broad stress tolerance window,
Mhm.
then the experience is completely different.
Yeah. So I know one thing I wanted to bring Kim on to this podcast is we both really value a type of therapeutic approach called a bottom up approach,
Hmm.
which pretty much just means if you think of your brain, we have our prefrontal cortex, which is where your forehead is, in our left hemisphere. And those two parts of our brain are two peas in a pod. It's like they both speak Chinese, and their language is a lot about logic, being chronological, creating narrative. Even so, interesting thing about the prefrontal cortex usually does not develop fully until about 26, and it's the part of the brain that says, let me think about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So if you think of a teen and you're like, did you even think about did you think about what you were doing before you drove 80 miles per hour? No, they did not, because their
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex isn't fully
Yeah.
developed yet. And then there's a part of our brain called the subcortex, where our limbic system sits, and then our right hemisphere. Those two parts of the brain are two peas in a pod, and they deal with experiences more somatically, more implicitly, more emotionally. And so a top-down approach is dealing with the prefrontal and left hemisphere. So let's find language, which very Western American, right? Hey, diagnosis, or cognitive behavioral therapy. But trauma is stored subcortically. And you actually can't access it with language. And so that bottom-up approach is where you feel this really deep relief and a rewiring of the nervous system. So both are very important, a top-down and bottom-up.
Which, same thing with the diagnoses, and then also how the body's experiencing these diagnoses. With this, once again, this is why both and
Yes.
they're both important. They're both
Yes.
imperative, because the logistical side needs the clarity, needs the simplicity, needs the
It needs to have the
tangibility.
buy-in.
Yeah.
I have found
Yeah.
that even for me in my personal healing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, my body would not let me do EMDR until I got trained in it,
Yeah.
because my prefrontal left hemisphere
You need to
was
understand it. You
was the
needed to
gatekeeper to be able to have buy-in to say, okay, I trust you enough to go here. So tell me a little bit about how you love approaching a bottom-up healing.
So my absolute favorite way to do more bottom up is guided imagery. I love a good guided
Yes.
imagery. Like one time, I saw this person very briefly, and she was just expressing the anger that she was feeling, and there was a lot of things in her life that was, you know, it was more overwhelm, and it kind of all blended into one. But in this conversation, she said, "I just want to feel the peace and the settling in, like a snow globe with the last snowflake falling."
Mm,
And so that was the opportunity. So whenever you think of tools, for me and the way I work with clients, it's like they create their own tools. So to
exactly.
say like, okay, this is all that I use, it's really difficult, because for me, it's like I'm listening. And so then they create their own tools. But the one thing that it's pretty consistent that I just is one of my favorite tools is guided imagery. And so I was able to utilize that image for her that she had already had in her body. It was familiar. It was safe. She knew it. And so did this whole guided imagery experience with her, and just feeling into that last snowflake, being that last snowflake.
Wow.
And like after 5 minutes, her anger, overwhelm, angst went from like an 8 to a 3,
Yeah.
and
And she
so
can bring that
yes,
wherever she
exactly.
is.
And that's the key, is because we truly have everything that we need to heal within us. We were immaculately created. So we truly have everything that we need. It's more along the lines of knowing how to tap in, but we need to know how to tap in by being safe. And if the
Yeah.
nervous system doesn't feel safe, then we can't really tap in,
Right.
you know.
One of
And so
my
that's where the bottom up comes in too.
one of my absolute favorite therapy models that is a very bottom-up approach is sand tray therapy. And I have to tell you a really funny story. So I was in grad school with my supervisor, and I was in triad supervision with another therapist, and our supervisor was training us in sand tray. And she says, Ariel, do you want to be my demonstration? I said, sure. And little old sassy Ariel was like, I'm not going to show her anything. She's not going to see any of my stuff in this sand
Yeah.
tray. And what was amazing is she said, just create your world. I said, okay. And so I put myself in the sand tray and created things. And then she's like, oh, so you feel out of control in your world. You don't feel respected. You feel small. And I was
Oh.
like, oh shit.
It was that moment
She
of
was
like,
like,
oh,
well, and
she just called it all out.
what was so amazing about it was sand tray therapy, even for the very, very heady, I ain't gonna
Mhm.
show you anything. I
Yeah.
need to stay very um, disconnected, very disintegrated with my
Mhm.
brain. I've got to stay logical prefrontal.
Yeah.
It immediately bypasses it.
That's awesome.
And
I
and
never knew
I've
that about Sandtray
oh
therapy.
my
I've never,
gosh,
like, done a deep
yes.
dive in
Oh
there.
girl, we got to do it.
Yeah,
We got to do
that
it.
is so
So, and
cool.
I love it because I actually just did a 5-day training with it. It's one of those therapies I've had just
Mhm.
ton of buy-in, and I'm like, I
Mhm.
gotta be certified. I've got to train other therapists in it,
Uh-huh.
and it's amazing. I mean, I've done it even with some clients where they put stuff in, and instinctively they don't even know, and then you
Mhm.
show it, or even listen. Even now that I know the theory, I'll
It
do a
doesn't
sand
matter.
tray. Oh yeah, I was in the training. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, Ariel, you realize you forgot yourself in the sand tray," or "Oh,
Yeah.
did you realize you're an
Mhm.
animal and you put everybody else as humans? I wonder what that means." And
And that's the thing is,
it's
like,
so
we're not
powerful.
and I think that's why I love this work so much, especially, like, with trauma healing and stress management and, because I really feel like they're, like, married in their own way, but, is because no matter what, you're not immune.
Mhm.
You're not immune
Yes, yes.
because, you can know all the things, but regardless, you're not immune. And, my own journey, it has kept me so humble in this work. And so then it kind of keeps me in check because working with my clients also, creates me working
Makes you
within
deal with your
myself.
stuff.
And I,
Yes.
I, I love that because, it helps me to grow, and it also helps me to be relatable and to honor where they are because we all feel pains. And so once
Mhm.
again, no matter how much we know, we still feel the pains. Nobody's immune from the pains, no
Right.
matter what kind of, what your genius is.
Right.
So
Right.
it sounds like that's kind of like with the sand tray therapy, like no matter what, it's still going to show everything,
Yes.
because I mean, we're not immune. You can't think your way out of it.
And I think what's really cool, and I'm sure you've experienced this, with a bottom up approach, it's like you're getting results 10 times quicker
Mhm.
using very Western American language
Mhm.
results, right?
Mhm.
But when you're doing a top down, you're really having to work through those neural pathways
Mhm.
because it's so cognitive.
Because
But
it's so
bot
protective. Like,
correct.
it's almost
That's a
like in
good
this
word.
ego way of, like, it's so protective that it's like, I'm not cracking my shell,
Mm.
and then we can go down this whole, like, rabbit hole of, like, the fascia and how that one time I was watching this documentary, and it was talking about how the fascia is essentially the body's, um coat of armor.
Mm.
And so whenever we go through so many things, like so many stressors, traumas, and things like that, that's why it's immovable. Like it creates this coat of armor. And so that's essentially what the brain is doing. So you can sit here and like I've had clients say, like, oh yeah, I hit a certain point with this type of therapeutic regimen and things like that. And they're like, and I don't need to go here and I don't need to go there.
Mhm,
And then
mhm.
right away they end up going there and going here. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so it's like it's completely different, and that's the beauty of it too, is as all of our approaches can complement each other so well,
Yes.
and to where even though you and I both do bottom up, it's still different,
It's different.
and
And
so
because of your gifting and your
Mhm,
training as a nurse, you're going to think of things that I'm not
mhm,
going to think of, like fascia. I'm
mhm.
like, oh yeah, forget about
Yeah.
fascia, but naturally,
Yeah,
I say there might be some counselors, but
yeah.
that's such a beautiful piece. And I know you and I really connected over our faith, and
Mhm,
and it sounds like the beauty of the work we get to do
mhm.
is seeing God's hand.
Absolutely.
And even how he created our bodies with the
Mhm,
fascia,
mhm.
with the prefrontal, and how there's just there's such, I'm going to totally butcher this word, intricacy
Oh,
in
absolutely.
caring for us and caring for how to be able to heal,
And that's
And
the
it's
thing
amazing.
is like, I always tell my clients, we are immaculately created and we are not meant to be God, but we are made in the image of God.
Mm,
And so the healing power that is within us is Him working through us.
yes.
And so it's not, going into sessions with clients and stuff. I'm never like, okay, well, is this going to work or should I do this tool or should I? No, like I'm the vessel for that work. So it's not,
Hmm.
there's no scarcity of like, well, what can I do for this person? Because it's not me that's doing it. I'm just the
Yes.
vessel that's holding space for this person. And so I trust that the healing is going to happen. And that's where it's differentiating healing versus curing, because
Mhm.
it's not even about the curative factor, because once again, the titles are part of the tool, but it's
Mhm.
not the healing. Whether or not you can still classify yourself as this or that is not a part of the, like, we focus too much on that. And so whenever we bring in the spiritual aspect of how we were created to heal, and how we were, created to just thrive in life,
Mm.
that's not even relevant.
Sure. That's something that's been so neat. I think about the scripture where he says he is strong in our weakness. And
Mhm.
as somebody who has chronic illness, there's been days that I may be having a flare or a lot of brain fog. Um, and I'm very sensitive with my clients that have had spiritual abuse, and
Mhm.
we may not talk about the Lord in session, but I'm praying for him in that whole session. And I'm like, okay, Lord, you're gonna have to be my brain.
Mhm.
And it is just profound because there are things that come up and I'm like, "Well, that was totally the Holy Spirit." And
Mhm.
honestly, I needed to hear that too, you
Exactly.
know?
I've said that many times too. I'm like, "Man, I needed this session too."
Right?
Because
Right?
it's like the things that come out whenever we give the glory to God, it's like the things that come out, it's all encompass healing. Like, it's not
Mm.
just, I'm doing this for you, or I in an egoic way, or this is me, this is my service, this is no, like, when the glory goes where the glory is
Supposed to go.
supposed to
Yeah.
go, I mean, it just flows how it needs to flow. The healing is, like you said, there's no real timetable. Whenever you're working with the body that God created, and you're listening, and you're assessing, and you're doing all these things, there's no timeline. Like, I've had
Mm.
people that have worked through something for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden it just clicks. And then it's like leaps and bounds,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it was in God's timing.
Yep.
Because if that person would have seen it earlier, then it wouldn't have made sense the same way. It wouldn't have
Mm.
had that same impact.
Right.
So
Divine timing.
even though, with the body up approach, the bottom up approach, even though, yes, it has the capabilities of going quickly, still we can't, as humans, we can't deny God's timing and what is
Yes.
seen, when it's seen, how it's seen.
I'll often tell my clients that since I work with a lot of complex trauma, a big thing when you have trauma is you just want relief. And so
Mhm.
they're wanting results really badly. Listen, I've been there. And I have to remind them, listen, you cannot go where the body does not want to go. And
Mhm.
you will actually do some level of dissociating,
Mhm.
whether it's dissociating emotionally and just understanding this cognitively,
Mhm.
or you may start experiencing it emotionally and your body goes offline,
Yep.
So,
It's so
yeah.
true. It's so true. And that's why, you know, really the big takeaway here is to circle back into listening and assessing and looking, and for that person for who they are
Mhm.
and where they've been, what their stories are, and really helping them to navigate that, more than the goal of, because we get so goal focused nowadays.
Yes.
We get so goal
Yes.
focused. What is the successes? What is this? So
How
we're
do I
so
measure it? Yeah.
outcome focused. Where's the tangibles, that we forget the process. Lately, I've
Mhm.
been having a lot of couples, and I tell them, it's like, I trust your connection. What we
Mm.
need to, where the growth is dealing with the individualized stressors that's causing you to maybe filter and look at your spouse in a different way.
Mm.
That's, affecting how you love. That's affecting how you love yourself, and your person, and things like that. So it's really, I trust the connection, just like as
Mm.
us as humans. I trust that we have that interconnection. I trust that we can heal, and it's putting that trust appropriately into our great creator. Because
Sure.
if you didn't trust your body and mind, if you didn't trust all these things, then how would you heal it?
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
it's amazing how I remember sharing this with a client and the light bulb went off. I said,
Mhm.
when you have trauma, you are never taught to listen to your limitations, to
Mm-mm.
your needs, to what is authentic to you. And
Mhm.
so a big part of trauma therapy is rebuilding that relationship with yourself
Mhm.
and listening to when your body says, "Hey, I've had enough."
Mhm.
And sometimes people, when they're just wanting relief so badly, they don't even realize they're pushing past those very clear
Oh, yeah.
limitations that
Oh,
said,
yeah.
"Hey, I'm done here.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, thank you so much for coming today, y'all. If we had all day, Kim
Oh
and I,
yeah, we've
Kim,
been going round and round,
going on and on and on, which means we'll have to bring you back on. Kim, can you tell us the name of your beautiful practice? How people can get connected with you? If anybody's listening and says, "Hey, I need some Kim in my life," which listen, y'all all need some Kim in y'all life. I'm just saying.
Yes. So my business is called Karma Holistics and Nursing Approach. And you can get in contact with me by going to the website, karmaholistics.net. And they have all of my information. They have all the good stuff about the back end of what I do and everything like that. And my phone number, all that good stuff. Oh, well, and my phone number is 337-361-0074.
That's her business number.
Yes, business number.
She's
Not
married,
myself.
guys. No, I'm just picking. She's off the market, and she also has a wonderful social media presence. You have such a life-giving social media
Well, thank you.
presence. Anytime I'm, happen to be scrolling, like, oh, there's Sunshine Kim, but you also have a lot of great content that I learn a lot from.
Well,
So
thank you. I
if y'all
appreciate
need
that.
something life-giving to be able to see on social media, go follow
That
her as
too.
well.
I'm
Yes.
like 95 with technology half the time, so I forget to mention social media. So yes, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Karma Holistics, just look it up.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you again. Listen, thank you guys for tuning in and listening, and we will talk to y'all soon.